The crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the marble floor of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel ballroom. 100 wealthy guests in tailored suits and evening gowns mingled beneath the shimmer, their laughter echoing like wind chimes made of money. At the center of it all stood Marcus Wellington III, billionaire tech mogul, his smile sharp as a knife's edge. His eyes landed on a figure near the entrance, an older man in his 70s, wearing a faded military jacket with patches worn thin by time. The man's posture was straight despite his age, his weathered hands clasped gently in front of him. Marcus's voice cut through the cocktail chatter like breaking glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, look who's crashed our charity gala." He gestured dramatically toward the veteran. "I've seen better uniforms at costume shops." The room fell into uncomfortable silence, then nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. The old man's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His gray eyes remained steady, unshaken. Marcus walked closer, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the floor. "This is a $5,000 a plate event. Did someone forget to check credentials at the door?" The old man's name was Samuel Carter. He had come to the gala not for the champagne or the networking, but because the charity honored wounded veterans, men and women like the ones he'd served beside 50 years ago in a jungle half a world away. The invitation had come from the organization itself, a gesture of respect for his decades of quiet service to his fellow soldiers. Samuel lived alone now in a small apartment above a hardware store. His wife, Grace, had passed 3 years prior. Their only son, Daniel, had been a Marine, killed in action during his second deployment. Samuel kept Daniel's folded flag on his mantel, next to Grace's photo. Every morning, he saluted them both. He didn't talk much about his own service. The medal stayed in a wooden box in his closet. The memories stayed deeper still, the weight of a wounded brother in arms across his shoulders, the sound of helicopters cutting through monsoon rain, the faces of 19 men he'd carried to safety when their convoy was ambushed. 19 men who went home to their families because Samuel refused to leave anyone behind. Marcus Wellington III knew none of this. He only knew the price of things, never their value. Born into wealth, multiplied by tech investments, he measured worth in stock portfolios and square footage. His penthouse overlooked the city like a throne room. His charity work was calculated, good for the brand, good for tax breaks, good for photos in magazines. Empathy was a word in his publicist's press releases, not a feeling in his chest. Tonight was supposed to elevate his image. The humble billionaire giving back. The cameras were positioned perfectly. "Sir, I was invited," Samuel said quietly, pulling a slightly wrinkled envelope from his jacket pocket. "By the Veterans Foundation." Marcus plucked the invitation from Samuel's hand, barely glancing at it before tossing it onto a nearby table. "Oh, I'm sure they sent these to every old-timer with a uniform in their closet." His grin widened. "Tell me, what did you do to earn all those fancy patches? File paperwork? Peel potatoes?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A woman in pearls looked away. A man in a tuxedo cleared his throat but said nothing. Samuel's voice remained level. "I served my country." "Served?" Marcus laughed, turning to his audience. "Everyone served. My accountant serves me coffee. That doesn't make him a hero." He stepped closer to Samuel, close enough that the cameras would catch every moment. "If you're really some kind of decorated war hero, prove it. Show us what makes you worthy of being here with people who actually contribute to society." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the waiters stopped moving. The photographer's camera hung at his side, finger frozen on the shutter button. Samuel stood perfectly still. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from a flood of memories, the screams of wounded men, the smell of smoke and blood, the promise he'd made to every soldier he'd ever served with. "Leave no one behind." "Well?" Marcus pressed, his voice dripping with mockery. "We're waiting." Samuel's hand moved slowly to the collar of his jacket. His fingers, gnarled from age and old injuries, worked the buttons with deliberate care. No one spoke. The chandelier seemed to dim as every eye in the room fixed on the old man. He opened his jacket. Beneath the worn fabric was a simple white shirt, and pinned to the chest was a medal. Not shiny and new but weathered by time, a blue ribbon with white stars, and below it, a bronze star hanging from a red, white, and blue ribbon. The Medal of Honor. America's highest military decoration. The photographer gasped audibly. The woman in pearls brought her hand to her mouth. Marcus's smile faltered. Samuel reached into his inside pocket and withdrew a small photograph, its edges soft from years of handling. He placed it gently on the table beside his discarded invitation. The photo showed a young man in uniform, no older than 23, covered in mud and blood, carrying another soldier across his shoulders through waist-deep water. Behind them, smoke rose from burning vehicles. The young man's face was fierce with determination, his eyes locked on something beyond the camera. That young man was Samuel. Beside the photo, he placed a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, typed on military letterhead. A citation. 19 names listed. 19 lives saved during an 8-hour firefight when Samuel, a platoon sergeant, had refused evacuation until every wounded man under his command was airlifted to safety. He'd taken 3 bullets in the process. He'd never mentioned it to anyone who didn't ask. The room held its breath. Marcus stared at the photo. His face went pale. His hand reached out, trembling, and picked up the faded image. "No," he whispered. His voice cracked. "No, it can't be." He looked closer. In the background of the photograph, barely visible through the smoke, was the soldier being carried, young, unconscious, his name barely legible on his torn uniform. CPLJ Wellington. James Wellington. Marcus's father. The billionaire's knees buckled. He sank into the nearest chair, still clutching the photograph. His father had never talked much about the war, only that he'd been saved by an angel who wouldn't leave me to die. He'd carried guilt about it his whole life, survivor's guilt, the doctors called it. He'd made Marcus promise to honor veterans, to never forget their sacrifice. And Marcus had forgotten. He'd turned his father's gratitude into a photo opportunity. He'd mocked the very man who'd given him his father, his family, his entire existence. Tears streamed down Marcus's face. His perfectly styled hair fell across his forehead as his shoulders shook. Around him, guests wiped their eyes. The photographer lowered his camera entirely, not out of professionalism, but out of reverence for something too sacred to capture. "You?" Marcus's voice broke. "You saved my father." Samuel's expression remained gentle, though his own eyes glistened. "I saved 19 sons that day," he said softly. "And I'd do it again." Marcus stood on unsteady legs. His expensive suit suddenly felt like a costume, his confidence stripped away. He walked toward Samuel, not as a billionaire addressing a guest, but as a son approaching the man who'd given him everything. "Sir, I—" Words failed him. What could he say? How could he apologize for mocking a man who'd bled so his father could come home? Samuel looked at him with the same steady gaze he'd held throughout the entire ordeal. No anger. No judgment. Just understanding. "You didn't know," Samuel said simply. "That's no excuse." Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. He did something he hadn't done since childhood. He bowed his head. "My father told me about you. He called you his guardian angel. He said he owed you his life, and I owed you mine. And I just—" His voice shattered. "I'm so sorry." Samuel placed a weathered hand on Marcus's shoulder. The gesture was fatherly, forgiving. "Your father was a good man. He went home and built a beautiful life. That's all I ever wanted for any of them." Marcus looked up, tears streaming freely. "Let me make this right. Please. Tell me how." Samuel smiled, the kind of smile that held 50 years of hard-won wisdom. "Honor them," he said. Not just tonight. Not just for cameras. Really honor the ones who served. The ones who never came home. The ones who came home broken. Make your father proud. The ballroom erupted in applause, not the polite golf clap of high society, but genuine, thunderous recognition. People weren't clapping for a show. They were bearing witness to transformation. Marcus turned to the crowd, his face tear-stained and humbled. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice shook but held firm, I want you to meet Sergeant Samuel Carter. The man who saved my father's life. The man who taught me tonight what real wealth looks like. He took off his Rolex, worth more than Samuel's entire year of rent, and held it for a moment before setting it down. Material things suddenly seemed meaningless. Instead, he embraced Samuel, holding him like family, like the grandfather he'd never truly appreciated. As the evening continued, Marcus sat beside Samuel, listening to quiet stories of service and sacrifice. No cameras captured it. No press releases were written. It was simply a man learning what his father had always known, that heroes don't wear price tags. The old veteran eventually left, declining a car service, preferring to walk through the city streets he'd protected, past the buildings that stood because men like him had stood first. Marcus watched him go, forever changed. Never judge a soul by the wear of their clothes or the quietness of their presence. Behind humble exteriors live stories of extraordinary courage, stories that make the loudest voices fall silent and the proudest hearts bow down. True greatness needs no announcement. It simply serves, sacrifices, and saves. And if we're wise enough, if we're humble enough, we'll recognize it before it's too late. Sometimes the poorest among us are the richest in spirit. And sometimes the most powerful need saving by those with no power at all. Honor those who serve in silence. Respect the quiet strength of sacrifice. And remember, the medals we can't see are often the ones most dearly earned. If this story touched your heart, remember to look twice at every soul you meet. Behind weathered faces and worn uniforms live angels who saved the world. Share this story to remind others that kindness, respect, and gratitude never go out of style.